So today we're kind of going in our 24th week. Pretty awesome, 24 weeks of doing this. We're going to continue the Halloween theme. We're going to go into death and dying. And so the first thing that I wanted to ask, I'm really curious if anyone here is born in the quarter of mutation. There are 4 quarters of the year. And the 4 quarters of the year, basically the quarter of mutation is what we're actually entering into. So we're entering into it. It's late Scorpio, all of Sagittarius, all of Capricorn, and early Aquarius. So, but you're in gate 41. That's already the quarter of initiation. That's the first gate of the quarter of initiation. That's the new year. That's when the new year. As a side note, our calendar year starts in January 1st, but in human design, we look at the gates, the hexagrams, right? So if you all have been studying the hexagrams of the I Ching, you'll know that the year is subdivided by 64 hexagrams. And each of these 64 hexagrams correlates to a codon in your DNA. And there's only one start codon. Now, for those who haven't studied how these codons work, it's actually fascinating. It's worth checking out. You can see that when there's going to be a DNA replication process, all of these protons will be glomming on and getting ready for the transcription to start, and they won't start until they actually reach the start codon that kind of clicks into it, and then it'll start off this chain reaction that'll basically be spinning out new DNA, or more technically RNA, because that's the copy. And it'll keep going in its replication until it reaches a stop codon. And there's 3 stop codons in each of these.
Stop codon will maybe exemplify the opposite or the paradox of that expression.
They're not opposite. It's not the opposite of gate 41. Actually, interestingly, one of the stop codons is gate 40. And gate 40 is the gate of saying no. And basically it says, no, we're done, we're stopping. But gate 41, the opposite hexagram is, 31. Yeah, I don't think 31 is is 31 a stop codon? There's 3 of them. And if you're really interested in the biogenetic part of it, you can kind of dig into this, and there are correlations for each of the hexagrams to each of the codons. But the reason I'm mentioning this now is because the new year actually begins with this start codon, which is interesting because that happens, when is your birthday, Michael? 26th, yeah, so it happens, 3 weeks. Because you're a 6th line, so you're at the end of that. The 21st, something like that, yeah.
So the first degree of Aquarius, probably.
No.
No?
No, it's a little bit after. The first degree of Aquarius is still in gate 60. The end of gate 60. It's like the 5th line of gate 60. Well, basically what I'm saying is 3 weeks after our calendar new year is when the actual new year starts at a genetic level, because that's when the activation of the start codon in your DNA occurs. So people tend to make all of their resolutions for the New Year's, and actually you're still in the last year for 3 weeks into the next year.
Like, people go to gym membership, go 2 days, and then say coffee.
Yeah, so the moral of this story is wait until the 21st of January to really be in the new year. Like 2019 isn't really over until January 21st, 2020.
I think you feel that subtly, too.
People do, but they still are trying to make a big change occur in those first 3 weeks when they're still really carrying out the previous cycle. The other interesting thing is that there's about 3 months out of the year, 88 days, give or take, out of the year, when it's not good to make big decisions. Now, if you've already made a decision ahead of time, especially for those who have, their clarity out of this process that they've come to, it's fine to commit during those times. But for instance, in my case, my birthday was September 25th. My design date is June 27th, or something like that. Or 28th. And so from that period of time, from late June through September of each year, my unconscious, my design has already had its design date birthday. Does everyone follow this? I don't want to be, because we're born at a certain time, but 3 months before we're born, the design crystal has already entered into the unborn fetus. And so our unconscious is already aware for 3 months before the moment of birth. And so its birthday, its beginning of the new cycle, our unconscious's new cycle begins 3 months before our own. And so for that interim, we're out of sync. For 9 months out of the year, we're totally aligned, and both our conscious and our unconscious are in the same cycle. But for 3 months out of the year, the 3 months before our birthday, our unconscious is actually already has a foot into the next cycle. And it's already moved on. And the conscious mind is not caught up. It's constantly lagging behind. The conscious mind is much slower to catch up.
Is it blinded or not able to communicate?
It's not aware of the new trend yet. It has not entered into awareness. It has to bubble up into consciousness over about 3 months. So the reason I bring up these times of birth and these quarters, the new year begins in, late January, 3 weeks into January. But for the 3 months before that, right, so I'm talking about late October, all of November, all of December, and then into the first 3 weeks of January. So right now, we have just entered into the quarter of mutation. So who here was born in the quarter of mutation? Anybody? I don't think so. When were you born, Sam? Yeah. And William, you're in Aquarius, but what day? Yeah. So Trevor is Libra. Yeah. So there's. Yeah, I was at a birthday party. I mean, we're right on the edge of the quarter of mutation right now. Well, yeah, no, we're in it. We're in it. It started.
Almost every Scorpio, then, right? Scorpio season.
Oh, I guess it is all Scorpios. Yeah, no, I guess you're right.
It's definitely every Sagittarius. You feel it when
Well,
you
yeah.
start a little bit. Didn't you feel that a little bit? Say you have Scorpio as your Venus, right? And so right now, like in the physical realm and stuff like that, like sometimes maybe.
Wait, isn't the quarter of mutation the end of Scorpio?
Yeah, I thought.
Maybe we're not in it yet. I think we're not in it yet. Well, it's 3 months before January 21st. So then we go December 21st, that's 1 month. November 21st is... Oh, yeah, October 21st. Okay, yeah, so we're in it. Yeah, so I guess you're right, all Scorpio. And it's the end of Libra that's in it. Okay.
Pretty much
No, that's
all Scorpios, 100% of all Sagittarius, and most Capricorns as
No, it's all Capricorns because it's...
well. Oh, yeah, because you said it's like...
Wait, but how is that possible? What are these dates? It's the...
That doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make sense. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying is the end of Scorpio. I've always thought it was the end of Scorpio. So it's... Because it's 3 months before January 21st. I'm just going to look it up.
Right, that's gotta... Yes, that's the middle of October.
90 days before January 21st is... no, because it's a quarter. It's actually...
So,
Okay, if you want to be technical, it's 91.2 days. If you want to be technical, it's 91.2 because it's 1/4 of 365 days. So 91 days before January 21st. So in our case, so it started October 22nd. Okay, so we just entered into it. I'm glad we said that.
we'll celebrate
The leap year is to calibrate.
4 years.
The leap year is to calibrate because we're actually 365 and change, 365.25 days. So that's why every 4 years we have to add a. So, but I already said 91.25. I mean, I guess you could technically say 91.365 if you want to incorporate 1/4 of 25, but it's not necessary. So for our purposes. So in any case, what does it mean to be born? So first of all, it's interesting. Nobody here is born in the quarter of mutation. Nobody here in this room was born in the quarter of mutation. It's like herding cats here. Too many non-sacral beings. I'm sorry. We need some more. Sorry, I don't mean to single you all out. It's just, there's enough is enough. If you get to a certain point, enough is enough. No, I can't get on with it because I keep getting dragged into these conversations. Right. You put two people together, you have a middle box. Okay, so.
Who's orange?
This is why I almost just called it off tonight because I just can't. I'm like,
Just get back to the script.
I have a script. I'm talking about it.
Don't let them fight.
It's hecklers. Like this is why I'm gonna have a microphone next time. That way I can just keep talking. This is leading to the microphone.
Use the projectors.
Okay, so who knows? Well, no, some of the projectors are totally awesome. Totally respectful. So quarter of mutation. We don't have any. Yeah. Based on that. So we don't have any quarter of mutation folks here. So that's interesting. So we have quarter of initiation, we have quarter of civilization, and we have quarter of duality. So what are these quarters? The quarter of initiation is all about incarnating. So you Aquarii that we have here are here to bring people into the world and essentially it's a very mental realm because it's all about the mental incarnating into the form. So a huge part of your life purpose is how do we move from the mental realm to the formal realm, to the to actually having form, to the material realm. And it's not yet material. It is a very, very mental process that occurs in this quarter of initiation.
And then Aquarius being all right.
I'd like to ask you to not ask any questions for a little bit. Okay. So, and yes, the answer is yes. Okay. So when you're in this quarter of initiation, it's all about how to be incarnate. So a quarter of the people that are in the entire world that are alive today are literally here just to kind of help the rest of us know what it is to incarnate. And I'm going to leave that kind of vague because I want to move on with this. Next, we have people in the quarter of civilization. So civilization. So I'm trying to think of who. So Sen, you're in the quarter, right? Because when were you born? June 12th. Yeah. So you're in the quarter of civilization, and I think so. I wish I had these exact dates. Yeah, June 21st, July. Yeah, you're in the quarter of civilization. So the quarter of civilization is the most material. It's the most densely material. Oh, and you're also quarter of Aquarius, Pisces, Aries. These are the initiators. These are the people who live in the mental realm, who are basically bringing mental forms into the mental into form. So then we have the civilization folks, and they're actually really densely material. They're really here to have businesses, to create things, to create empires, to make material things happen, to work in the material realm, to live their life in the material realm, to build civilization as we know it, to create the entire symbolic edifice, basically the builders of the Maya, if you will. And that's what they're here for. And they're not really here to take from the mental, and they're also not really here, as you'll see as we move on through the quarters, to engage with others as much as they're here to be involved in material processes.
So it's mostly Taurus, Gemini.
Yeah. And then we get to the Leo, Sag, Libra. And again, these are going to be like late Leo, all Sag, or all of Libra, and then beginning of Scorpio. Is it beginning of Scorpio? No. Okay, I'm off by one. Late Cancer, all of Leo, all of Sag. You'll have to look up the dates. This is why I'm frustrated, because this is all in the book, but I couldn't get the book in time. So the actual dates.
You're basically starting near the
You're
beginning.
laying it out. You're laying it out.
Well, this is just a very frustrating talk, but I have the entire sequence. It's just, okay, so anyway, what's interesting, so starting with the initiation folks, you're here to help people incarnate. Then we get to the civilization folks, you're basically here to build civilization. Now, I'm duality, and duality, I wonder if, I think you are too, see.
Leo,
And
Virgo,
you are also Trevor. What's that?
It's probably Leo, Virgo, Libra.
No, because Scorpio is already,
No, I don't
because
think it's
October
Scorpio.
21st.
I think it's mostly Leo.
Yeah, it's actually the other end. It's a little bit of Cancer. It's the very end of Cancer, because all of Scorpio is in mutation, which we're getting to. And then the very end of Libras. Okay, so what is duality about? These are people whose entire purpose for being here is essentially, no, it's not. It is a purpose. The entire purpose is to know how to relate to people. It's like having a heckler. Their entire purpose is not a purpose. You know? Like, okay. Okay, so quarter of duality, we are here to relate. We're here to know how to relate. We're here to become experts in relating. We're here to know about relationship. We're here to guide others in relationship. And then finally, and this is one of the most profound things for me to realize about looking at these quarters, which was really bizarre the first time I realized it, literally 25% of people alive today are here to help you die. They're the quarter of mutation. They're here to help you prepare for death. And that's a lot. It's not like there's a few people out there who are here to help you prepare for death. 25% of people are cognitively wired to be attuned to death, to be attuned to the afterlife, to be attuned to helping others prepare. And, I think about, what is it really to help someone prepare for death? There's a lot of fear around death, right? And to really help them prepare, I've been close to a number of people who've died. I'm sure most people have. And also people of a certain age who are kind of preparing for death, because we're only really guaranteed 84 years in this life if nothing goes wrong. 84 years is a Uranian cycle. We used to be guaranteed closer to 27 years or 30, which was a Saturnian cycle. And then starting in 1781, we evolved from the seven-centered to the nine-centered being, which moved from the Saturnian cycle to the Uranian cycle of 84 years. Which, by the way, as a side note, we're not yet adults. We still go through physical puberty at 14, which is the halfway point of the Saturn cycle. But we don't go through, we don't actually go through our movement into adulthood until we're 42 years old now as nine-centered beings. So that's why it's very different than how it used to be.
You can say 6'3" with the 3 levels of the roof and the engagement.
Yeah, the first half of your roof cycle, you're still kind of a child, and you're still like you go through these progressive rites of passage, but the Saturnian being really has a kind of a guaranteed lifespan of 84 years if nothing goes wrong. And things do go wrong, and we'll talk about that in a moment, particularly when you get into serotonin. But the thing I want to point out about mutation, it's so interesting to think about, 25% of the people alive today are here to help prepare us to die. And just how little we look at death in Western culture. Yeah, exactly. It's like 2 billion people are here to help us die. And what does it mean to help someone die? Talking to someone I know who many of you know was in his late 60s or now he's 70, had heart attacks, all this stuff. Very scared of death, and then told me, this was a year or two ago when he had another health issue, that he was at a cafe and he met a young man who had worked at a nursing home who had been there with many people when they died and was able to talk to him and say, I experienced, it's something that a lot of hospice workers talk about. You experience the sense of grace and the change from the resistance to death to the acceptance and surrender. Yeah, and you see this, grace is a real thing. It's not just a made-up concept. The feeling of grace is an emotional tone that overcomes the person as they're preparing for death. So it's interesting to think that, that many of these people we know are actually here to help orient us towards death. Okay, so I'm just going to go through a few of the things on my list here. I'm going to try to keep this kind of short. Sorry if I'm a little frustrated. It's been a little bit difficult one today. No, it's just been a difficult one today. I almost canceled it, but it's nice to keep it going. I thought we're 24 weeks nonstop. We haven't had a break.
So much
missed your order.
Oh, well, thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to go over a few things. So there are some very, very important basics for all of human design for everyone. Now, human design usually doesn't have these kind of generic advice for everyone. Usually it's very oriented to who you are as a person. But there's a couple basics. One is that you sleep alone, and this is fundamental. A lot of people know about this. And it's because your aura is highly susceptible to conditioning when you're asleep, and it will really dramatically affect you. It's almost like you'll be getting dreams that are meant for the other person. You'll be getting these processes meant for the other person if you're sleeping in their aura. And by the way, the aura extends at least an arm's length past your outstretched arm. So, people inadvertently sleep in the auras of strangers in apartment buildings, So it's... And the other interesting thing is that, evolutionarily speaking, we have evolved towards the ability to not be in each other's auras, that we started all huddled in each other's auras. That's the only way we could survive. People think of caves as a solitary life. No, there were 30 or 40 people living in a tiny cave, piled on each other for warmth, when you go back to caveman, cavewoman days. Pardon? Well, that's a holdover from the seven-centered being, and you can still cuddle each other until you fall asleep, and then at the moment before you fall asleep, you go in your own space. But what I'm saying is, so that's one of the most basic generics. The other generic, though, which is not as well known, is that you don't disturb your body for 72 hours after death. And these are both crucial. This is for everyone. You don't sleep next to people when you're alive, and you don't mess with the body after death. That's not going to affect as much. Having another aura around the body is way different than being an organ donor, okay? Basically, if you start cutting into the brainstem, if you start cutting into the spinal cord, or you start dismembering the body, it's going to really dramatically interrupt the neural activity, which is ongoing, and this is a scientific fact, for up to 72 hours after death. And that neural activity is essentially what is known as the bardo. So the bardo has been talked about in every tradition. We can go back to the Phoenicians, and they have their own versions of it, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and the Egyptians, and so many. This is the afterlife. Yeah, and there's a complete science of the bardo. There's a mechanics of the bardo that human design goes into, which is I've never encountered anywhere else because it actually talks about the 6 kinds of bardo. And I'm not going to go into the bardo sequences, but essentially what happens is just how everything is on this sort of fractally repeating pattern of 6 phases, so too the exact moment of your death enters you into one of the 6. It's almost like you can think of like a first line bardo, a second line bardo, a third line bardo, and so on. And if it will open here, so I actually have it, I'm going to talk about, yeah. So this is from Rave Cosmology, Book 3, Dying, Death, and the Bardo Stages. And this is a series of lectures from Ra Uru Hu. And there's a chapter on the bardo, and it's fascinating because you can actually, there's a few fascinating aspects of this. One is you realize that there are very distinct bardo phases, that the bardo is not just one homogenized generic thing, and that people have very different bardo experiences, different afterlife experiences. And I know at least one of us here has had an afterlife experience, which maybe I would invite you to share once this is finished, if you'd like to share with people. And you know, that's why there are these different ideas about what the afterlife is, because there are very distinct experiences that you can go through. So, you know, the bardo sequences, let me see if I can find a list of them. So essentially, and you know, I have this PDF available. I think I can. It's too much to go into in this talk, but you know, the light at the end of the tunnel is like one of the bardo experiences, or the, you know, there's these different ones, yeah. So
The question asks you to come back. You could dive
Pardon?
into energy carries, but also the time for you to go in and left once you keep the process at the bottom of the change. Even though I believe you might experience all of them through it, but your entry is in the
yeah, but you don't get to experience all of them. Is the other interesting part. Most people experience like 2.5, because at a certain point, your personality crystal, which is like hovering around the body, gets picked up. Well, it gets picked up. This is the best case scenario. Now, last week we talked about the rogue crystal bundles. This is what happens if you don't get your bardo experience, right? But if you get your bardo, yeah, but if you get your bardo experience, the personality bundle actually gets picked up and gets to return to one of the 16 prime personality bundles, which are basically what we would call the Godheads, which are kind of conditioning or, you know, programming agencies. Okay, so the other interesting thing is, you know, I'm not going to read from this because there's some really great stuff. I'm seeing it here, but I'll just kind of leave it at that for now. That there's the continuation of neural activity after death. The personality crystal sticks around. The moment of death, the design crystal, which is basically the consciousness of the unconscious, you know, it's the unconscious mind, which has been wanting to bond with the magnetic monopole for your entire life, actually gets to consummate that love, so to speak, kind of poetically, even though it's not really an intelligent thing. It's just a filtration mechanism. But if I could personify it, if I could anthropomorphize it, it gets to consummate that love, and then it returns to the design crystal bundle, kind of exits through the body and returns. The personality crystal sticks around. So that's why, you know, it's very, very important not to. The personality. Okay, here's what Ra Uru Hu talking about it. The design crystal bundle. Okay, design crystal. Let's see. The personality crystal has an ability to be able to tap into the remaining neural activity necessary for the experience of bardo consciousness for up to 72 hours. A 72-hour journey of the personality of the passenger as it leaves the form. The perfect journey for the personality. As a matter of fact, the ultimate dream of the personality, to be free of the form and still to be conscious. This is like something we didn't realize we wanted our entire lives, to be free from the meat, right?
We didn't realize that. Sorry.
Okay. It's the ultimate dream of the personality. But once the bardo is done, that dream, and it is a dream, fades very quickly. It's these myths we have about contacting the dead and seances and all these things. One needs to understand something about the personality crystal and personality consciousness that we experience as mind. Whatever we experience is conditioned by the form, by the body. We can never escape that. If you have a frontal lobotomy, you are no longer going to be interested in the consciousness program. It's very easy, in fact, to distort the form in such a way that it no longer do you have the viability of the neocortex in mind. What he's saying is the mind is still so dependent on the brain. Right?
So if you're a super Christian, you go into this called program. You might create what you feel like you deserve based upon what you believe correctly into the rest of the creating. That's a longer than that.
I mean, we're all conditioned. You can be conditioned as an atheist. Or
Yeah.
So.
That's
A personality crystal, which is a translator in essence of the consciousness field, if it has no hardware, has no way of concretizing that translation. When you take the personality crystal ultimately out of the vehicle beyond the bardo and return it to the crystal bundle, there is no consciousness. There's no personal self-reflected consciousness. There's only the hum of frequency. So it's the moment between it actually returns. It's not like we have some eternal afterlife where we're aware in this space once the personality crystal has re-merged with its prime bundle. I mean, it is possible to sit at a seance and have a sense of Aunt Rosie. There's always the possibility that her particular out-of-form crystal with a neutrino stream going through it can, one way or another, pop through you. But if you try to talk back to her, she isn't going to hear anything.
fun.
What it's saying is that there's still an essence of a person that can filter a frequency, but that essence of the person filtering the frequency is not a self-reflected consciousness that has a personality the way we understand it. Okay, so essentially, the ultimate magic for the personality crystal is this incredible journey in a timeless state. On the outside, it's 72 hours. But that's relative to the way we measure time in the illusion, in the Maya. But there is no illusion when you're dead. The outside time and inside time, we're not talking about different. We're not talking about the same things. We're talking about a journey, but it's a journey through it's a sort of a timeless journey for the personality crystal that's outside of time now in this way. There are a lot of variations, thousands actually, once we get down to the color, tone, and bass level. But when we look at the most fundamental, the time that you die, you will die during a particular quality of time, which is one of the lines of the hexagrams which subdivide our year. Right? So you're going to die at a particular time where you enter into the bardo at a certain quality of time. Now again, when we get down to the nitty-gritty of the exact moment of death, there's subdivisions within subdivisions of that time. So you get an extremely particular death trip.
So, say if you're only dead for 12 minutes, you wouldn't be sure coming back from that if what you experienced in that bardo was happening in 12 minutes or in 29 days that you spent underneath consciousness.
It would be interesting to look at the different timelines there and to look at your experience and kind of compare that to some of the different bardo states. So in any case, though, if you look at the exact moment of death when your pulse stops, that is going to be the moment that you enter into the bardo state. So just like the exact moment of birth with the eyes opening and so on and leaving the birth canal is when the personality crystal enters the form. But this is just, if there's one key takeaway from this, besides the fact your body shouldn't be disturbed after death, it's that we all get different trips, and that's one of the most incredible things is that it's not a homogenized form. As Ra puts it, we all have a right to write our own book of the dead. That's something that's really incredible. It's that we shouldn't just take these death trips that other people have written about as the thing that happens when you die. Right? But it's only something, but it's something the only thing we can offer those who are dying is a trade. The trade is, give us 72 hours. After all, you have nothing to lose, you're going to be dead. But make sure you give those 72 hours, because if you give those 72 hours, you're going to have the experience of a lifetime. Your personality has waited its entire life for that. So this is the real thing, but people won't do it. It's the hardest thing for people to do. All the great mystics dream of it. It was Buddha's dream, Buddha's deep dream. Let me be out of form and keep my consciousness. It's the great dream of the mind. He must have been surprised, at least I hope he was, when he got to the end of the bardo and that movie was over. So many human beings do not get that journey. They don't get to have what are the essential completion experiences. So many answers, so many things to grasp, so much to be revealed, not limited by the construct. And more than that, the personality crystal that is able to go through its process correctly, that is able to enter into and complete its bardo, returns to where it belongs. It returns to its source. And I probably don't have time to go into this now, but there is an ultimate purpose for this. And if we talk about the larger picture of rave cosmology, how I went into this a little bit last week, how our universe is basically an unborn living entity. It's in its gestation phase. It's a fetus right now. Right? Our universe is not yet born. And we are basically in the solar system as a third eye of the universe, as the center of self-reflected consciousness for the universe. And eventually, all of these personality crystals that have been gathered together and all of the design crystals that have been gathered together will eventually be reused. So I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of years in the future. Will eventually be reused for a form that's ultimately going to be called the Aeron, or that's one of the names that we can kind of refer to it by. And this is a form that doesn't live or die and is essentially has a single decision it has to make. And it has a long time to make this decision. It's a silicon-based life form that this will be a topic for a different day, but essentially it will be using one personality crystal that was in a human, one design crystal that was in a human, and one personality crystal that was in a mammal. It will actually have 3 crystals, and that's why our relationship to mammals is so crucial, and why the new 9-centered beings are actually moving away from eating meat. Particularly, not necessarily us, because we're this transitional form, but the new children that are mostly being born autistic, what we call autistic and things like that, are moving away from eating meat. And there's a whole thing about the coming changes and these new forms that are evolving and their sensitivities and so on. But
The reason I thought where he was, because he was actually in that third eye place for those days. When he was that crystal, and the crystal he gained from that.
it's the connection that, oh, you're talking about Ra, yeah, Ra's experience in that. Yeah, right. It was crucial that Ra's dog was there during his encounter. It's absolutely crucial. And so our relationship to other mammals is very, very special, and it's not just some meaningless thing in the grand cosmic scheme. And that's one of the interesting points. Yes, Michael?
What's up with the losing the severing of the channel that connects us with animals?
That as we evolve, we're essentially not going to be able to domesticate channels, the mammals. Well, that's the channel of the butcher. That's the channel of domesticating animals and of eating meat. And so as that undergoes mutation, which is also leading to the extreme rise in prostate cancer in the last 20 years, we're also, because it's connected to the prostate, we're also not going to be able to domesticate animals. So at a certain point, the new animals incarnating are not going to allow themselves to be domesticated. They're going to have... Exactly. They won't be willing. It's basically the channel that allows us to tame animals in this. So, okay. So I'm going to wrap this up. There's a lot more to go into, but, so it is fascinating. For those who are interested, I would strongly urge you to learn about the 6 different bardo states and reading about them, understanding, as you get these kind of keys, as you understand the 6 lines or the different personalities, for instance, or the 6 colors, the different motivations, and so on, you can look at the 6 bardo states and understand the continuity with those bardo states and with the sort of fractal repetition. The other interesting thing is the exact moment of death, there's going to be a particular line of the I Ching you're born into, which has an exaltation and a detriment, and it's going to be particular planetary bodies. And it's only revealed at the moment of death which were truly your planetary protectors your entire life. So I did this with a few people. I did this with Carl Jung, for instance, looking at his exact moment of death and seeing that, Jupiter and Saturn, for example, I forget which ones, I think it might have been those 2, were the exaltation and detriment of the line he died on, and seeing that those were actually his great protectors throughout his life, and then looking at sort of key moments of Jupiter and Saturn throughout his life. It's like we all have these 2 protectors, and we don't know what they are until we die. But our whole life there have been these 2 sort of planetary forces assigned to us. And of course we give one the value of exaltation and one the value of detriment, but that's just a moral judgment that has no place, truly. I mean, even if one is the angel and one's the demon, so to speak, they're still both looking out for us.
If you're aware of those things, you become those things in your interpretation until you realize that you were the one making it, essentially.
So, yeah, but we're not able to know what they are until the moment of death. So that's an interesting thing. Okay, I'm going to get through it. So a few more practical things. So the first practical thing, give yourself 72 hours after death. Tell everyone you know, put it in your will, leave a little card in your wallet. Next one is serotonin. Be extremely careful messing with your serotonin because serotonin is a clock. Serotonin is Serotonin is absolutely, we have a finite amount of serotonin that we'll ever produce our entire lives. And so serotonin reuptake inhibitors, yes, and
What about for antidepressants and stuff?
yeah, those completely, you would be amazed the amount of suicides that come out of those and the amount of, because the other thing I'll talk about is that death generally occurs, I mean, so death happens a number of ways, but yeah, it's absolutely serotonin reuptake inhibitors, antidepressants, street drugs like MDMA, these things are actually extremely detrimental because, now I'm not talking about accidental deaths that cause a car accident or something, but natural deaths of natural causes actually occur every month. The moon goes through a cycle where basically it tests our body's serotonin level to see if it still wants to live. And every single month, the time between gate 2 and gate 29 is really that test. And gate 29 is the gate of saying yes. And ultimately, it's the gate of saying yes to life. And you can notice when the moon is in gate 29, you will either be reinvigorated more or less, or you'll be afraid to die. And you ultimately begin the dying process when the fear of death or the desire not to die outweighs the desire to live. You've lost the desire to live, but it becomes instead a fear of death.
What sign is
29, let's see. It's in, I have it right here. I think it's Leo. Yeah, it's Leo. Yeah. Yeah, and then 2 is in Taurus. So really when the moon's moving from Taurus to Leo is a really interesting time each month. Really, if you start to notice, there's a number of dying keys. Like it has to go through a number of phases to prepare someone for death. But I'm really talking about death from old age. But, I mean, so then there's the question of how does death occur otherwise? Well, that occurs generally from the not self. And so death tends to occur because someone who has undefined spleen, for instance, should never be spontaneous. And the ball goes in the street, and they spontaneously go on the street and hit a car, right? And the undefined spleen people, if they are really living their design, they won't be spontaneous. Spontaneity can get you killed. If you have undefined spleen, don't be spontaneous. We're not made to be spontaneous, but we love being spontaneous, right? Or it can also happen through definition, not just the not self, but through definition. So for instance, a lot of death, in fact, probably the majority of death in this world, of premature death, not from old age, occurs through the solar plexus. Solar plexus is where we get all war, it's where we get murder, it's where we get all of the, sort of premature death through impulsivity. The 27 thing is its own kind of, especially sixth lines are extremely vulnerable around age 27 and again around age 53. But, it's because the solar plexus has not yet finished its mutation to being a pure awareness center and is still a motor that drives action. And so people, commit suicide when they're really low on their wave, right? Or they are super impulsive and drive really quick and they're so happy and they're really high on their wave and get an accident, something like that. So the emotional wave is absolutely the cause of most premature death in this world. And it's also the cause of war. If we're ever going to have an actual world peace, it will only be after the mutation of the solar plexus that stops the emotional wave and stops it being a factor in our decision making. So it becomes a pure awareness center. So the death sequence is initiated through gate 29 when the moon moves through gate 29. Now, a couple other things I wanted to mention. It's interesting because the mind is the only thing that has a problem with death. The vehicle, the body, has no problem with death. The body is, in fact, always ready to die. I think this might be why people are a little bit afraid when they're in a high building looking out over an edge or something, because they're like, well, my body doesn't really give a shit. My body doesn't really care, yeah. The body's not, it's the mind that's striving. The mind is what's striving for life. But again, that is what that gate 29 is with the test. So, all right, I'm going to wrap this one up, but the basics are 72 hours after death, don't disturb the body. Be very careful about serotonin. And then if you really are interested in putting the mind at ease, because so many people are so afraid of death and their lives are so informed by this fear of death. And, look at the people in your life who were born in the quarter of mutation, because those are the people who can actually guide you to come to peace with it. Because all of us are going to die. We all have to come to peace with it. We all ultimately have to accept that fact. And none of us in this room can help each other accept that fact because none of us are equipped cognitively. I mean, we can talk about it, but some people are actually really here to help you prepare. And we should allow those people to do what they're here to do, which is to. I just think it's mind blowing that 25% of the people in this world are basically here to help us leave it, one way or another.
If you're open
So.
to it, it'll take about 4 minutes just to tell my experience.
Yeah, so I would love to. Okay, so I'll just finish up on this one. First of all, are there any questions about death and dying? I think we're good, right? We kind of got them all in. All right, thanks for watching, and then if you would like to share your experience, Trevor. And I have a recording. You want to record
That's
it?
fine. That's fine. Okay, I feel important. You can interrupt me as much as you possibly can, please. So when I was 21, I was walking around like everything was fine. And I don't remember getting sick. I don't remember being in a hospital bed. I don't remember even going to the doctor. But I have a throat infection, this misdiagnosis of an ear infection. It went on without being treated. So I had this abscess in my throat that had to be dealt with because it was hard. So they took me in the hospital, close to my airway, intubate me, cut me open, drain the abscess, sew me up, pulled the tube out of my throat, and my throat, they say, collapsed like gooey marshmallows. So I wasn't breathing for several minutes, no pulse. There was a doctor that was there that day. Thank God he was there that day. They defibrillated me a bunch of times. I had scars from it. They put a tube through my nose, got me breathing. And so my throat was so fucked up, they had to keep me in a medically induced drug coma for 30 days while my throat healed around this tube. But I couldn't be asleep enough to suffer brain damage, couldn't be awake enough to know I was in the hospital bed. But there was about 12 minutes there with no pulse, and I didn't suffer the brain damage that was anticipated. But yeah, so I believe in one perception, one out of infinite, that I know it's like to die, to not be a human being, to create your reality based upon the dogma and beliefs that you had going into the space, to make sense of it as you created it. So my mother and father and anybody close to me in the family never wanted to talk about my experience because I wrote it all down. And I was like really trying to tell everybody like, hey, no, like did this and this and that. Because when I came out of that coma, what was real and what wasn't real, I couldn't discern for about 2 weeks. That's how real it was on the other side of that, And there was no entertaining of like my story or what I've been through or anything like that because they're just like, oh no, we need you to be normal again, like just shh. But basically, I was there and I created myself. I was raised Mormon, and I didn't practice it, but that's what's in here, right? So I created myself a heaven and a hell based upon what I felt like I deserved, based upon me seeing my whole life in one circle at one time without time being an issue at once, and measured that wavelength, and then let that wavelength disperse according to its counterparts of wavelengths. So I knew at that moment that, wow, it is really important to be good. Because I want to be up here. I don't want to be me. And for some reason, it just felt like that's not where you want to be. You want to be up higher. I had a heaven experience where I was at this is before Avatar, okay? It was like midsummer's night, Avatar Lake, going through, shiny. There's a big canopy bed, green grass, and a dog. There was a girl made of all diamond light, and you couldn't see her face. She had this long flowy thing on, and we made love in the canopy bed. And then I would lay on the ground and let the dog breathe on my face.
The dog what?
Breathe on my face. Okay. Hell, I was in a room with a clock, with an eye in the clock, and the clock would look at me the whole time as the clock ticked, but it wasn't going anywhere. And it didn't change. And I think heaven is change, hell is things that don't change. But like Neil Gaiman in his book The Sandman, it says things change even in hell. So that means to believe that things aren't one way. There's not just up and down. There's both, black and white. There's both. They're not different. They imply each other. And what flipped it for me was seeing my hell scenario with people wearing clothes like this, like cheap black stage clothes, shuffling their feet and holding up what I'm looking at all around me. And so I was like, fuck, these fucking guys are doing this and shit. Like, okay, please go. I'm doing this, right? And when I decided that I was the one who's doing it, things got golden. The clock molded into an infinity symbol. I know it sounds ridiculous. It's a story. Just take it for what it is. The clock molded into an infinity symbol, and then I was whisked away to different forms of expression with my consciousness, understanding that my consciousness was the consciousness. So reaching your hand in Canada Pringles, creating your heaven and hell until you grab your own hand. And then you're like, oh shit, this is actually like, I'm the dude, okay? So this is just, I'll regret saying this, but this is what happened. So I found myself on a table surrounded by a bunch of grays, as we call them. And I remember being like, having a choice at that moment on the table, like, do you want to go back? Do you want to stay? What do you want to do? And I was like, fuck you guys. I'm going to tell everybody about you. I'm going to go back. Let's go back. Let's do this. Let's do this. Do this. Anyway, and then I was in a big metal box that seemed like for an eternity that could flex, but it was iridescent, but it was full of energy, and it was just like lightning light. Like you knew that you were just powerful. Like you were just this thing. And coming out of that, I had been intubated for over a month, and it was very close. They didn't know how I was going to be when I came back. They didn't know if I suffer brain damage, walk, talk, move, anything again. All my muscles had atrophy. I had to learn how to walk again, talk again, play the guitar again, speak again, think again, all that kind of shit. And she came back actually pretty quickly. Speaking was tough because my vocal cords were so severely damaged I could barely talk. But so my family was so relieved that I had been breathing that everybody left. So I woke up. The first cognizant moment was me laying on this bed. I couldn't move. I couldn't talk. And I had this narrative in my head of these sinister things going on around me because I had a special blood that everybody wanted, and I was being protected by the George Bush time and tanks and stuff at the fucking hospital. Anyway, yeah, it's crazy. But that's just what on the TV. It's on Fox News that my grandpa has playing while I'm unconscious. So I have all this whole narrative about how I need to protect myself, whatever. So I gave him a fake name, and I told him I was Lieutenant Dan because my legs didn't work. So I figured they just tell him I'm Lieutenant Dan, and they would know who I was. And it was a real big joke for everybody. And my mom, it sucks because my mom's very intelligent. My grandfather's very intelligent. He would say, Mark, of an educated mind and entertain thoughts without accepting them, so we could talk about whatever. And I tried to tell her about this. I wrote it all down, all this kind of stuff. I had my experiences with the awkward homies, which is what I would call six-line beings that aren't us, and those kind of things. There was a man with me the whole time. He had a long black coat on with a black hat, and he would sit next to me cross-legged in the chair, and he wouldn't speak. I asked him a bunch of questions, and he just threw the ace of spades at me. I remember, it's my head that's creating everything. It's my head that's making the shapes. It's my head that's making the grays look like grays, and the hat man look like the hat man, and this person look like that. But you really had a choice about what you wanted, almost, Alan Watts has this thing, he talks about the warrior's journey. So if you could go to bed every night and sleep for 70 years and choose your dreams, maybe for the first couple dreams you go to lavish parties, you'd be someone important, like an actor, eating filet mignon in a high-rise, restaurant or something like that with people waiting for you. After that, you get bored, and then I see my friends who have achieved financial freedom go on these trips. So then after you do that, after you're banging Russian miles and you got money and all this stuff, then you want adventures. Okay, then you want Indiana Jones shit. Then you want to go find relics and get good at guns. You can chop down guards and stuff like that. It's really culty weird shit. I got out of there. But we're on that trip of the adventure. And then after that comes something that was so unpredictable, something that was so, such a surprise that you had to act on your feet and live it. And that's where we are now. It's really funny how that circled back to this. Now, what has changed a lot for me in my life because of that, and because of a lot of things, is I don't believe in coincidence. Things either happen or they don't. They happen, period. I met Jonah, period. It's not like I don't write that off as just a maybe or whatever. Also, it really pisses off, say, my girlfriend or people I might work for or my parents or anything like that when it's hey, you know what? You really, because I don't remember getting sick. Remember that. I do not remember going to the doctor for the first time. I don't remember anything. I woke up a month later after this. So literally, my life got taken right out from under me, and it wasn't like I was hopped up on some crazy drugs. It wasn't like I was living some dangerous life. It was just a freak thing that happened, and then it was just gone. So from that point on, it was just well, I'm gonna do what makes me happy because literally now could be your last moment. And people be well, yeah, that's all and good, but and then they rationalize because will I be here tomorrow? Probably. But not absolutely. And that's just how it kind of feels about it. So to live in that kind of gray area of, yeah, you might be cold, so I need a jacket, but also I might not even be there to need the jacket. So it's kind of weird. But my mom, one day when my grandmother died, we never talked about it, and I tried to. One day she finally just was what's it like to die? Now I believe I know what it's like to die 100% because I've done it. But I can't tell that to anybody else to be true, like Jonah's saying. You can't take this as any sort of absolute at all because it's all perspective, and there's an infinite number of them, and there's no truth, only an interpretation. You know, if you say it's true and that's your truth, then that could be true. If I say it was my truth and that was my truth, then that could be true. But I've done a lot of research into near-death experiences and also death experiences like this. And most people who are gone for more than, say, 7 minutes with no brain damage or no brain activity suffer severe brain damage. So the fact that I'm able to come out and talk, kind of cool. I mean, yeah.
Do you think there's any sort of like structural symmetry to those three phases that you mentioned?
Absolutely.
The,
It sounds like a story.
you said there's a wish fulfillment one, and an adventuring one, and then a more practical one.
But yeah, so I think when you first get there, you get to decide, you get to create. So I told my mom, her mom had just died. She's like, what's that going to be like? And I said, whatever you want it to be like, Mom. What do you want it to be like? She's like, well, I want to go back there and I want to see all my family and I want us to be all around each other and I want us to like have a really happy time. I was like, well, you will then. You know, but this is the biggest thing, the biggest part of it is to be good with yourself when you hit that pillow at night as far as like your character, how you treat people, and like your overall like energy, because I feel like it's super, for me anyway, maybe that was my own trip for judgment, right, on my energy based upon what I decided was like high or low, you know, in my actions and reactions to the people around me. So at that point, it was like it's really important to be nice to people, to be good to people, to give value to people, because selfishly, I'd like to vibrate a little bit higher the next time I do die. Another thing too is I was 21, I'm 35. So that was almost 15 years ago. I've been to the doctor maybe once since then. I don't think about getting sick. I don't worry about what I'm eating. I don't worry about the drugs I'm doing. I don't think about my health at all. And somehow I'm healthy. You know? But the thing is that there's a point where the different entities became more than just what they were in the coma state, where I was visited by them in physical reality. And I have tons of emails I just went through the other night, so I had to reset my email address. I wrote to Stephen Hawking, I wrote to Jeff Bezos, I wrote to the entire staff of SETI, I wrote it to the UFO Congress, I wrote to everyone about my experience, because there's 2 people on Earth right now who I have brought and dialed into the frequency of, because Jonah talks about this, the underlying beings, they're here all the time. They're here right now, they follow me around, they might follow you around, they're here. Can you turn your frequency into that channel? And when you do, when it happened to me, when I turned my frequency, like not knowing exactly what was going to happen, but knowing that I was doing that, they came, and it was this like silver line string between my consciousness and theirs, and they were like, so what's up, dude? And I was like, well, we're all made of the same stuff, right? Thinking about the dot in the paper. The paper representing everything ever has been, could be, will be in the history of this and that non-measured, and then the dot being you. Put a dot on a piece of paper, you are the paper, you are the dot, you both. So when I said, yeah, we're all made of the same stuff, then they kind of eased up. They gave me some sort of, George Washington has almost identical experience. In the sky, they manipulated cloud vapor. I have pictures of it. I'm just saying, I don't really like talking about this because people are like, ooh, that dude's crazy, but you're already past that, so... yeah, so I did a bunch of research, and then they started coming to me. Once they knew that I was like on the level, they started coming to me in altered states right before I fall asleep, right before I wake up. Anytime I take acid, if I took a big dab, you can feel the vibration going higher, and then I know they're there. And I actually moved to my parents' house in Phoenix for a couple of weeks, sleep in the living room while my dad was away for work, and then stay up all night because I didn't want to be fucked with. And then one time we went golfing during the day. I woke up, all the walls were red, the walls were not red. And what we had to consider a gray came down the stairs, and the grays are like the awkward homies. They just don't know how to act. They like try to smile, they try to be cool, they're just so contrived, and you're like, just stop. They don't want to say anything, they're never going to say anything. You're here to observe, you're here to observe them. But what I learned through that is a lot of agency when it comes to ourselves in the universe as beings and as beings of sovereignty. And so basically I just stood in my power and was like, listen, back the fuck up. I don't want to see you guys just bounce. Like, you just stop. And it did stop, which was cool. But then you start missing them. And anyway, I started reading a lot. There's this girl from Australia who wrote a book about how she could conjure these spirits through steam, water vapor, all this kind of stuff, smoke. And I was like, wow, this is kind of what I do. There's a guy named Avery Hopkins who you know, and there's a guy named Joey Doherty who's Pretty Lights, who does the light show for Dance Spirit. You know him. So those are two of my closest friends. I told them about what's happened. Joey was actually there the next morning. It was really cool because I came back to the house after all that had happened, and Joey's like banging my friend Blake, and I was like, dude, I gotta talk to you. He's like, bro, just sleep. I'm like, yeah, all right. I go lay down in Sarah's room. She's out of town. There's a golden retriever. There's like this mutt. There's my buddy's dog, and there's two cats. And these dogs and cats, they don't really like each other. They're gonna be in the same room. But what they did was they all came and laid on top of me at the same time. And that's this animal thing, man. This is this thing. I have a dog right now. And there's like this little GIF, I don't know if you guys saw it online, where it's like this guy, he's like a reflector or a projector or something like that, and then empathic being, and he goes up, someone's having a hard time, and he touches them, and the black comes into him, then he goes to another person, helps them, and the black, before he he's like consumed by darkness, and then he goes home and he touches his dog, and he's like washes off from him. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that there was a dog in like my heaven scenario. And so yeah, man, that was just like something that happened to me, and there's no really place to like explain it or anything. All the emails I wrote, I only got one response, and it was very like, yeah, right, kind of thing. Because I told him like, there's $100,000 to anybody who could prove anything supernatural or paranormal, and I can do it. I don't do it, but I have done it twice with friends. That if I know how to tune to that frequency, and it's unconditional love. It's dot and paper. It's your breathing. It is a conscious choice to level up to that spot, and then they're there. And both homies got up off the ground and said, "Fuck this! No. This is fucking ridiculous. It's scary." Right? But at first I had this like kind of like Luke Skywalker complex, like, oh man, like I could be like up on the spaceship and like this like bridge for humanity and da. But no, it really wasn't like that at all. And more than ever, like I was on the other side of the coin for so long, eons, whatever you want to call it, that the human experience is all I'm interested in. You know, I tried to send out my emails to SETI, to Stephen Hawking, to Jeff Bezos, all these people who, if they got the email, are probably like, oh, we already know this stuff, you know. And yeah, the research agency got close to coming, but then they say, so wait, I have to be in the right like frame of like mind and heart to see these things. And I was like, yeah, you have to. It's a frequency change. And he's like, well, I don't have to have a frequency change to see a car drive down the street. And I was like, well, yeah, man, that's the point, though, dude. Like, they're not what we see. We don't see those things right now unless we're 5'd out. And then when I started researching my blood type, O negative, they have like all these symptoms, or not symptoms, or like incongruencies, occurrences, behaviors that equip with that bloodline. And, you know, it's alien encounters, it's low body temp, it's sensitive to sunlight, it's, you know, all this kind of shit that I was going through. So I felt a little bit supported in that. And also just to kind of like say it to you guys nonchalantly and not like a real like, not a preachy way, not like think about it like this way. But that was like my experience in the Bardo, in the half measure, in that area. I do remember having a choice whether to come back or stay, and I chose to come back. And there's a story from the doctor and my dad while I'm chained to the hospital bed, because I can't wake up and realize there's a tube down my throat and freak out and pull it out. So the doc brings me out of conscious or into consciousness just a little bit, cuts the propofol drip, and just kind of like lets me back in. And he's like, "How are you feeling today, Trev?" And I flipped him off. And my dad and mom laughed. I'm like, "Okay, he's gonna be all right." But yeah, thank you. What's that? Thanks for letting me share.
Everyone, thanks for your comments tonight. I think those of us who want to can go to karaoke now. And,
No, you're not.
what? What are you talking about?
Well, first.
We already had question time.
Huh?
We already had question time.
Right.
Okay, what's your question?
Side
This
step.
virus.
Ooh.
What's your question?
Well, first I have a comment, which is that a useful joke to each other can be so you know the dot on wallpaper thing, and you're back and you're all looking for a space. You know, when you're in like Photoshop or whatever, to invert the image, you hit Command I.
Huh.
That is not Command B.
Huh?
No, that's the good, yeah.
interesting?
What a
Command
coincidence!
eye.
What a coincidence! That's a coincidence.
I like
The
it.
space between snowflakes and the snowflake is essentially what we're at.
That's very true.
But with the thought in the paper, it's so simple. I have priests come into the bar, I was like, so what do you think about that? And they're like, no, God's kingdom's over here. I'm like, no, like, this is everything. I'm like, no.
Yeah, that's true. There's a bunch of like Buddhist stories about that kind of
Yeah, but that's where I got it from. I studied, well, after like this shit happened, I was like, what's going to make sense? And I searched all over the place. And it was Buddhist philosophy, Eastern philosophy, Lhasa, Alan Watts, that about that pantheism, holographic theory, universal mortality, those kind of things that made sense. I'm just grateful to be here. Now, and I think that's what I love living life in the past. That little song. But it's interesting. It's interesting. It'll be very interesting to see.
I'm curious too. It feels like there's a planet X.
No, because listen, I've told you this like last night. I told this to the person who
Right.
So I also said this in the people we were talking about it. We were talking about this. And talking about that. If you look, show me. I think you can do something. Okay.
So is this you know?
If you're able to be taught, it's all about people. It's all about you.
So what are those capacities?
I think that if you can follow me, if you put your hand on the chest and feel me breathing into it, you'll be in that spot. But that's the thing, it's like, and that's the thing, it's all like, so that's really good. You can see it like that's it. It's like, honestly, I've said things that give me this like satisfaction. Literally, like, it doesn't make them. In the same way that say, it's great, maybe in the city, ships coming in and you can compare it to. For me to say this kind of stuff, it's ships. It's it. But
That's what it's like.
it is,
Yeah, it is just. That's what's cool. Is to not make it a
it's super.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's no technology needed other than the human body. You don't need a fucking $12 million telescope to connect to it. And I think a lot of people know that. Think about Bernie Brown, think about the shot, think about these people chilling these instances. You know, they go to sort of pregnancy trees. No, it's something like it's like being private. It's like God should be
Yes.
I really wanted to copy it.
But I didn't think it was my mom's all scared and my mom really bad. It's one of those reassured. Like, wow, you want that? That's but the thing is that there's also some truth that you can rationalize doing things that other people consider bad. Rationalize it to the point where they're not even an issue for you. Now, about you, some other outside judgment because it is not an issue. You're the judge.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Let's go. Jonah, thank you.
Thank
You don't think there's another part
What?
to this?
That's nice.
Really? You can't
There's
tell?
so much more. There's so much more.
No, I mean like you don't think that there's an obvious vacancy here?
Well, there's a lot of. I mean, there's so much we have to read it.
Well, what? I only have two centers around here, so what am I thinking? What's not being said? No one wants to say. What could it be?
And then here's the thing. Same with demons.
What do you
The
know?
more power you
You have
use,
to say.
the more power they have. So if you find them, they're going to show you them. And you say, wow, I'm cool because of what I did. And you're fucked.
I think something else.
If you take that and say, you know, see, look what I did, look what I made. Have you ever been in meditation and got to know the one and that's very important to disagree? That's what we do. That's the objective.
Never actually.
You said that, or
Aside
So we
from
had
the living
people who had a sound healing class, it's a
and did. It did. It did
I just
die
like to do things that
immediately after.
personal consciousness.
Yeah.
Measurable.
They stopped.
What is to like talking to someone like myself, or you know, like I'm not cool with smoking. Spirit, I don't need
They
some of this.
stopped.
Get anything out of it. This time, going through, and it's not, you know, whatever. But it is all about the human experience. It's someone back from when you're 16, and when I feel them, it's like hear them. You know, it's a frequency. You know, it's felt often times, and then it's like, you're not smart. I might have more technology, socially. These things are more smart. Like, actually, I'm smart. I'm saying, you asked me to come up. Basically, caught me fucking lie.
It seems like a really
What's that? Oh,
You want it.
no. It's better on you. And they'll have a